young prince rides through a forest, or what was once a forest. He's trying to find something that happened 100 years ago, back when maids plucked fowls in their laps, geese turned on spits for the king's supper, and cooks boxed kitchen boys on the ear.
A king and queen once upon a time reigned in a country a great way off, where there were in those days fairies.
The king and queen had everything they might want, but no children. Until one day, the queen rescued a fish, or it could have been a fairy, or a frog, or a statue of a frog. And in return, the fish, fairy or frog, granted her her wish for a daughter.
So very beautiful that the king could not cease looking on her for joy, and said he would hold a great feast and make merry, and show the child to all the land.
The king asked everyone to the feast, including, at his wife's request, fairies. But because there weren't enough golden dishes to go round, they left one of the fairies out. This fairy's pride was hurt. After 11 of the 12 invited fairies gave their blessing to the new baby, our uninvited fairy sneaked in and started up.
The king's daughter shall in her 15th year be wounded by a spindle and fall down dead.
The 12th fairy used her gift to soften the curse, saying that the king's daughter
should not really die, but should only fall asleep for 100 years.
And so everything that's meant to happen happens. Despite the king's best efforts to shield his daughter from spindles, on her 15th birthday, Briar Rose discovered a secret room where a woman sat spinning. Delighted by the pretty thing that twisted and turned, she touched the spindle and, wounded, fell down lifeless.
However, she was not dead, but had only fallen into a deep sleep. And the king and the queen, who had just come home, and all their court fell asleep too. And the horses slept in the stables, and the dogs in the court, the pigeons on the housetop, and the very flies slept upon the walls. And the cook, who was at that moment pulling the kitchen boy by the hair to give him a box on the ear for something he had done amiss, let him go, and both fell asleep. The butler, who was slyly tasting the ale, fell asleep with the jug at his lips, and thus everything stood still and slept soundly. A large hedge of thorns soon grew around the palace, and every year it became higher and thicker.
As the hedge grew, elsewhere life carried on. What we're not told is whether the interior lives of the daughter, the king, the queen, the cook and the kitchen boy continued to evolve over the course of the century. Around the palace things changed. Cars arrived. Maids no longer plucked fowls in their laps. Cooks stopped beating boys, and boys that age had to go to school. Women started to give birth in hospitals. The city expanded, and new post-war terraces saw the end of the last thatched cottage south of the river, which in any case had been a relic for some time. Public services changed hands, and trams came and went. People went late-night shopping. There was an increased choice of beer, which wasn't drunk from jugs anymore, and buses became cash-free. Meanwhile, the silent household slept, and the enchanted hedge kept growing. It's nearly time for our prince to make his journey.
You hear that, Samson?
Sure enough.
After many, many years, there came a king's son into the land, and an old man told him the story of the thicket of thorns, and how a beautiful palace stood behind it, and how a wonderful princess called Briar Rose lay in it asleep with all her court. He told, too, that he had heard from his grandfather that many, many princes had come and had tried to break through the thicket, but that they had all stuck fast in it and died.
Then the young prince said,
"All this shall not frighten me. I will go and see this Briar Rose."
The old man tried to stop him, but he insisted. And so he sets off, riding back through time and asking directions as he goes. Sometimes he senses a thicket close by, but can't see it, and other times he sees hedges but feels nothing. He grazes his legs against invisible bushes, circles through space, and just as he's about to give up, is thrown by his weary horse into a ditch where he hits his head. When he comes to, he finds himself in that enchanted forest.
Now that very day 100 years were ended, and as the prince came to the thicket, he saw nothing but beautiful flowering shrubs, through which he went with ease, and they shut in after him as thick as ever. Then he came at last to the palace,
where he finds everything just as described, even the cook in the kitchen. And when he goes still further, he gets to the old tower,
and opened the door of the little room in which Briar Rose was, and there she lay, fast asleep on a couch by the window. She looked so beautiful that he could not take his eyes off her, so he stooped down and gave her a kiss. But the moment he kissed her, she opened her eyes and awoke and smiled upon him, and they went out together. And soon the king and queen also awoke, and all the court, and gazed on each other with great wonder.
And Briar Rose said,
I want to marry you.
Me?
Yeah.
And then the prince and Briar Rose were married, and the wedding feast was given, and they lived happily together all their lives.
Okay, I'm here with lemonade.